Welcome to this video where I will show you how to build a beautiful and functional full-stack RemindMe application using NextJs and Typescript. This application will help you organize your tasks and reminders in different collections, each with a stunning gradient appearance. You will learn how to use the latest features of NextJs such as server components, ServerActions, and app directory. You will also learn how to use Typescript to add type safety and code quality to your project. We will use React Hook Form, XOD and Prisma to handle forms, validations and database operations. This application is styled with TailwindCSS and ShadcnUI, two amazing libraries for creating modern and responsive web designs. Let's get started. We are going to create our application with Next.js, so let's go in our terminal and type npx create -next-app at latest. The name for the project will be remind/me. We will use Typescript. We are going to use ESLint. Choose yes for Tailwind CSS. Select no for source directory. We are going to use the app router. And select no for the import alias customization. And now I will bring up the project on VS Code. So code remind me. On the left we have our project open with VS Code. On the right, a preview of the final result. I will often show the preview of the final result during the video to have a track to follow. The first thing that we are going to implement is the authentication. So let's start. I will follow the Clerk documentation. So let's open the terminal. Then I will copy the install command and paste it on the terminal. So let's do that. Now we have to set the environment keys. So let's go back in our project and let's create a file called .env. And now you have to sign up to Clerk in order to get your keys. So let's go on the Clerk dashboard. And after logging in or signing up, you can create a new application. And I'm calling mine Remind Me. I will use the default providers, but you can add as many as you want. So let's create application. And then I will copy those and paste on our .env file. Let's go back to the Clerk documentation. And now we are going to add the Clerk provider. So let's go back in our app folder, the layout.tsx file. Let's copy the import. So we are importing Clerk provider from Clerk Next.js. And we are going to wrap the HTML tag with Clerk provider. In the next step, we are going to add a middleware to our application in order to protect our roots. So let's go back in our Project Explorer, and in the root folder, let's add the middleware.ts file. And let's copy the content from here and paste it on our file. Perfect. At this point, as you can see, your application is fully protected by Clerk. Open the terminal and type npm run dev. We are going to start our development server. So let's go back to localhost 3000. And as you can see, Clerk is requesting us to log in. And now, as you can see, I can see my application. Now let's go back to the Clerk documentation. And let's start building our sign up and sign in page. So let's go back in the Project Explorer. Inside the app folder, we are going to create an out folder inside round brackets. In this way, we are marking the out folder as a route group, and in this way we are preventing the folder from being included in the route's URL path. Now, inside the out folder, let's create a sign up folder, and inside the sign up root, we are going to add a sign up catch-all folder, like this. So I'm copying from here, paste it, and inside we are going to add a page.tsx file. And let's copy the content and paste it. Now we are going to do the same for the sign-in page. So what I'm going to do is to copy the sign up folder, paste it, renaming it, so sign in. Let's do the same for the inner folder, so let's rename it in sign in. And let's edit the page.tsx. Let's copy the content from here, so sign in content, paste it. And now we have both the sign in and sign up page. And now, as you can see, we have to add these variables to our .env file. So let's go here, paste it. With these variables, we are setting up clerk sign in and sign up URL. And also we are telling clerk to redirect to our index page after sign in and sign up. Now let's try to go to the sign in page. And as you can see, it's redirecting me on the index page because we are already logged in. So let's go back to our page inside the app folder. And we are going to delete the boilerplate code that NextJs has created for us. So let's delete this. And let's add a user button that can be imported from clerk NextJs. And let's set after sign out URL to slash. Now let's reload the page, and as you can see, I can see my user button, which is a component exported from clerk. With this button you can manage your account or you can sign out. And as you can see, after logging out, we have been redirected to the sign in page. If you try to go to the index page, you will be redirected because you are not logged in. Now let's try to log in again. And I'm inside. Let's now go and check our final result. As you can see, we have a navbar with the logo, a ThemeSwitcher component, and a sign in and sign up page. So let's go and style our application. I'm removing the unused import. And then let's go back to our layout.tsx file. And then inside our body, I will add a div that wraps our children. And I will style it flex, min age screen, full width, flex call, let's center the items, and let's set a black background on dark. Now before proceeding, we are going to install ShadcnUI, which is a component library. So let's go back to our terminal and let's type npm shadcn-ui at latest init, select yes for TypeScript, select New York for style, select neutral as base color, use the default one for global CSS, select no for CSS variables, default one, and also default one. We are going to use React server components, so select yes, and press enter. Now let's go back to the terminal and type npx shadcn-ui at latest add. And here you can cherry pick the components that you want. In my case, for simplicity, I'm selecting all of them by pressing A. Then I will press enter. Press enter again. And now let's go back to our layout file. And before children, let's add a navbar component that we are going to create in a few seconds. And also a separator, which can be imported by components UI separator. I'm starting back my development server. And now in the Project Explorer, let's go and create inside the components folder a navbar.tsx file. And I will use rfc, which is a React snippet. Let's go back to the layout file and let's import navbar from components navbar. Now let's refresh everything. Perfect. Now let's go to our navbar.tsx file and let's get rid of this and let's type nav. Inside I will put a logo component that we will create in a few seconds and also a div that contains the user button exported by clerk. So after sign out URL, let's put the slash, and also a ThemeSwitcher component that we are going to create. Let's go back to our Project Explorer and inside the components folder, let's create a logo.tsx file and also a ThemeSwitcher.tsx file. Now rfc to create a base component, and let's go also on logo.tsx file and let's create a base component. So let's go back to our navbar.tsx and let's import logo from logo and ThemeSwitcher from ThemeSwitcher. Perfect. Now let's style the navbar. So class name, flex, full width, items, send, justify between, some padding, and let's put a fixed height. And also we are going to style the div that contains the user button and the ThemeSwitcher. Flex, let's add some gap, and items, center. Now let's go back to our logo.tsx file let's replace the div with an h1 tag. Let's type remind me. Now we can style this text to XL, font bold, and I will color the text with a gradient. So background gradient to R, from red 500 to orange 500, background clip text, and text transparent. Now let's go back to our ThemeSwitcher.tsx file. Before editing the component, we are going to install a library called NextThemes. So let's go back to our terminal and let's type npm install NextThemes. Now let's go back to our project explorer, and in the root folder let's create a providers folder. Within this folder let's create a themeprovider.tsx file, and then let's start by adding the use client directive to our file, because this will be a client component. Then we are going to import theme provider as next themes provider from next themes. We are going to RFC theme provider, and then I'm going to export function theme provider that takes children, which is of type React node, and we are going to import it from React. And this component is going to return next theme provider that wraps the children. Now let's go back to our layout.tsx file and let's wrap this div. So I'm using a VS Code command called wrap with abbreviation with theme provider. And we can import theme provider from providers theme provider. And as you can see, now we are in dark mode because my system is set on dark mode. Let's go back to the themeprovider.tsx file and let's add some properties to it. Attribute class and enable system. This way we can also select the system preferences. Now, in order to avoid inconsistencies with server-side rendering, we are going to define a default theme for our project. So let's go back to our layout.tsx file and let's move the class name property from the body tag to the HTML tag. Let's wrap the interclass name with a cn function, which can be imported from libutils folder. And the cn function is a utility function exported by ShadcnUI that combines Tailwind merge and CLSX functions. Now let's go back to layout.tsx and let's add a dark class. Let's also add style property, color scheme, dark. Perfect. Now let's go back to page.tsx file and get rid of the user button and let's put hello for now. Now let's go back to our ThemeSwitcher, and the first thing that we are going to do is to mark this file with useClient in order to make it a client component. And this will be a client component because we are going to use JavaScript in order to change the theme on button click. Inside our component, we are going to use the useTheme hook that gives us the current theme and the set theme, use theme. And you can import useTheme from NextThemes. Then, in order to avoid the redirection errors, then we are going to create a mounted state. So set mounted equals use state with a default value of false. What we are going to do is, if it's not mounted, we are going to return null in order to avoid the redirection errors. Now we have to set the mounted to true. In order to do that, we can use the use effect hook. So set mounted true with an empty dependency array, so it will run only one time. And now let's add some comments. Use effect only runs on the client, so now we can safely show the UI. With this trick, we are avoiding iteration errors. And now let's go and replace the div with the tabs component, and let's import it from the components folder. So this one, not Radix UI, and the default value will be the theme. Let's close the tabs. Inside the tabs, we are going to use tab list component, and you can import it from UI tabs. And then we will have a tabs trigger with value liked. Let's copy and paste 2 times. So one with value dark and one with value system. Inside the liked tabs trigger, I will import a sun icon from RedXUI React icons. Inside the dark one, I will import a moon icon, also from RedXUI icons. And in the system trigger, we are going to import a desktop icon from RedXUI React icons. Perfect, now let's style those. So let's style the tab list first. Let's add a border. When it's dark, let's add border neutral 800. And on dark, let's change the background to a custom value 030303. And I spotted an error because tabs trigger is imported from RedXUI, but is wrong. So let's remove this and let's import tabs trigger from UI tabs. Now everything should work fine. Now let's style it. So class name 8 1.2 rem and width 1.2 rem. Let's do the same also for the moon icon. And also for the desktop icon. And for the moon icon, I will add a custom style, which is rotate 90, transition all, and when dark is selected, rotate 0. And now we have to add an on-click event to each tabs trigger to change the theme. So on-click E, set theme light for this one. So let's do the same for the dark trigger. Replace light with dark, and also for the system one. So let's paste it and then replace light with system. Let's try it now, and as you can see, it looks good. Now let's try the system button, and notice that my MacBook is set on dark mode. So as you can see, it's switching the theme to dark. Now let's go back to our sign-in page. So I'm logging out. Let's check our final result, and as you can see, I have to center this and change the background color. So let's go back to our application. Let's go back to layout.tsx file. And now what I'm going to do is to wrap our children with a main tag and style the main tag. So flex grow, full width, justify center, and on dark mode, background neutral 950. And let's also add items center in order to center everything. Perfect. And now the next step is to create the welcome message. So let's go back to our application. Let's log in. And now the first thing that I'm going to create is a welcome message. So let's go back to our page.tsx file. So inside the app folder, we have a page.tsx file. Let's remove unused imports. Now I'm replacing the hello string with welcome. Then let's go to a new line. And now I want to get the user first name and last name. So let's go back in our component. And to retrieve the user information, we can use the current user function exported by NextJs. And we have to wait for the result. So let's mark this function as async. And let's await for the result. And as you can see, the user can be null. So if user return error. We can add user dot first name and also user dot last name. Now let me zoom in order to show it better. And there is only the first name because I haven't set up the last name on my Google account. And before proceeding, I want to point out something. This component is a server component. In fact, this runs on the server, and the server ships to the client the final HTML code. By default, everything inside the app folder is a server component, and you can define client components, for example, our theme provider.tsx, by using the use client directive at the top of the file. And now, before showing you another cool thing about server components, let's go back to our lib folder and let's create a wait.ts file. And let's export const wait, a function that takes a time parameter of type number and returns a new promise that will be resolved after the time that we have chosen. So resolve time. Basically, this is the equivalent of a sleep function that you can find in other languages like Java. Now let's go back to our page.tsx, and now let's also wait, so await wait for 3000, which stands for 3000 milliseconds that are equivalent to 3 seconds. Now let's try to refresh our application, and as you can see, the loading spinner will stay there for at least 3 seconds. A good way to handle this is to use the suspense component exported by React. So let's create a function welcome message component, and let's move everything there. And in our home component, we are going to return a fragment that contains the welcome message component. Let's mark this function as async. And then we are going to wrap the welcome message inside a suspense component exported by React. So let's do that. And now I can add a fallback UI to this suspense function welcome message fallback. And I'm returning a div that contains loading. And I will use the welcome message fallback inside. Let's also increase the wait time to 6 seconds. Let's refresh the page, and as you can see, my application is working while I'm loading server components. And after 6 seconds, my component is rendered. Now I can get rid of the wait function. Then I will change this to be a h1 tag. Let's style it. Text for Excel and also font bold. And let's wrap everything inside a div. And let's style this to be flex and full width. Finally, we are going to edit the welcome message fallback. So let's copy this from the welcome message. Let's replace it. And now instead of this, we are going to add 2 skeletons, which can be imported from components UI skeleton. I'm using 2 of those because we have 2 lines. And now let's style the skeletons with 150 pixels, h 36 pixel. And let's do the same for the other skeleton. Let's try it now. And let's slow down the render. So wait 3 seconds. So we can check if our skeleton is good. Okay, now what I want to do is to give a custom layout to the content of my application. Let's go back to our app folder and let's create another group route called dashboard. Let's move the page.tsx file inside the dashboard folder, and everything should work anyway. So let's try. Everything is working. Now what we can do is add a custom layout.tsx file for our dashboard routes. So let's create it with RFC, and the layout will take a children React node. We can import it from React, and let's return children. And now let's style this. So class name, flex min age screen, full width, flex call items center. Then let's put another div that wraps our children, that has flex grow, window full, justify center, dark background, neutral 950. And let's make another div that wraps the children with a max width of 920 pixels. And I want to show it to you, so just for reference, dark background red 500, then flex call, flex grow, some padding. And now our application content will not exceed 920 pixels of width. And let's remove the background. Perfect. Let's check our final application. And the next thing that we are going to do is to create and read collections. So let's go back to our application. Let's open the terminal And what we are going to do is to install Prisma, which is a Node.js and TypeScript ORM. Let's go back to the terminal and type npm install at prisma/client. Then type npm install -D Prisma. And now let's type npx prisma init --data source -provider. And for simplicity, we are going to use SQLite. Press enter. And now we have to add a database URL environment in our env file. So let's open it. And as you can see, Prisma has already added the URL for us. If you want, you can change it. But for this video, I'm leaving the default one. Now let's go to the Prisma folder and open the schema.prisma. And now we are going to create our collection table. So let's go back to the Prisma schema and type model collection, which has an ID of type integer. Let's mark it as an ID. And also let's set the default value to be auto increment. A collection has also a name of type string, a user ID, which is the owner of the collection, a color, which is a string, and a created@date_time value that has a default value set to now. And another thing that I want is to make the name and the user ID unique. So a user cannot create two collections with the same name. So let's make it unique. And let's say name and also user ID. Perfect. Let's open back our terminal. And let's type npx prisma migrate dev in order to create the collection table. So let's press enter. And Prisma asks us to give a name for these migrations. And I'm gonna put, for example, created collection model. Press enter, and now our database is synced with the schema. Let's now open another instance of the terminal, and let's type npx Prisma Studio. And the Prisma Studio is a user interface for your database. As you can see, I have a collection table that now is empty. Let's go back to our application. I'm starting back my development server. And now we want a way to access to Prisma from our code. So, as you can see in the documentation, there is a best practice for instantiating a Prisma client with NextJs, which consists of using a singleton pattern. And we are doing this because with auto-reloading, we are creating a new instance of Prisma client on each auto-reload. And by doing this, we are creating too many instances of our client that are not being used. So the solution is to use a singleton pattern, which in practice is just going to create only one instance of our Prisma client. So let's go back to our Project Explorer, and in the lib folder, let's create a prisma.ts file. Let's copy this code and let's paste it. Perfect. So now let's go back to our dashboard page and let's create another server component. So async function collection list. Then what we want is to get the user. So await current user. And then we are going to get our collection by doing await prisma, which can be imported from lib prisma, the file that we created earlier, dot collection dot find many. And inside we are gonna put our filter. So where user ID equals to user.id. In this way, we are getting the collections that belongs to the user. Then we have to check if the collections are empty. So let's use shadcn alert. You can import it from components UI. Then alert title. There are no collections yet. And also alert title can be imported from components UI. And then alert description that you can import from components UI. And let's create a collection to get started. So let's grab this and let's return this. And then I want some custom icons. So let's go to hero icons. And as you can see, I can copy the JS6. I'm going back to components. I will create the icons folder. And within it, a file called setface.tsx. Let's create a basic component with our snippet. And now I'm replacing the div with the copied content. Let's go back to our page. And now let's use it, sad face. And then let's go to our page component. And after the welcome message, let's add collection list. And as you can see, there is our alert. So the next thing that I'm going to do is to put the collection list in a suspense. And also I will give a fallback to it. So for now, just let's say loading collections. Then let's add some margin bottom to these. So margin bottom 12. And also to the fallback margin bottom 12. Perfect. Now, the next thing that we are going to add, as you can see, is the create collection button. That triggers a sheet, which is a component exported from ShadcnUI, and that contains a form created with the React hook form. So let's go back to our application. So let's wrap the alert with a div. So I'm using emmet wrap with the abbreviation command, and let's put a div around it. Then let's put a create collection button that we are going to create in a few seconds. And let's style the div to be flex call, gap 5, and also margin top 4. Now let's go back to our components folder and let's create collection button.tsx, and inside I'm using RFC for now. Let's go back to our page and let's import it in order to fix the error. So import from components, create collection button. Now let's go back to our create collection button. And the first thing that we are going to do is to mark this component with use client at the top of the file in order to make this a client component. And we need to make this a client component because we are going to use state and also JavaScript code like onClick event handlers. And let's replace the div with a button that can be imported from UI button, which is in components. Then what we are going to say is that variant is outline, class name, dark text white, full width, dark, background neutral 950, and background white for light theme. Then inside we are going to type create collection. Sorry, I have a typo here. Perfect. And then I want to color this text with a gradient, so I'm going to wrap it around a span, and then class name, background gradient to R, from red 500 to orange 500, over to orange 800, so let's make it darker, and background clip text, and last thing text transparent. And let's also check it in light mode. And if you check the demo application, you can see that there is also a gradient border. In order to do this, we have to wrap our component with a div. And then let's style this to be full width, rounded, the same background gradient to R, from pink 500 via red 500 to yellow 500. And also, let's give it a padding of 1 pixel. Perfect. And if you want it thicker, you can just increase the padding, like this. Now, on click of the button, we have to show a sidebar. So let's go back to our application. I'm creating a const open set open state. So use state imported from React with a default value of false. And also a const handle open change that takes open of type boolean and sets open to open. And now on button click, what we are going to do on click, we are going to set open to true. Now I'm going to create a create collection sheet, or you can also call it sidebar if you want, that takes open equals open, and also on open change takes handle open change. Now let's go and create this component. So let's go back to our components folder and let's create collection sheet.tsx. And inside, I'm gonna use RFC as always. Let's go back to our Create Collection button and let's import this. Perfect. Now let's move to the Create Collection sheet file. The first thing that we are going to do is to create an interface props that consists of open of type Boolean and also on open change, which is a function that takes open Boolean and returns nothing. Then we are going to take these props on our component. And now let's add the sheet component. So sheet that can be imported from components UI sheet, and the sheet component takes an open Boolean and also on open change property. Then let's put a sheet content inside with a test. And as you can see, now it's working. Let's remove our test text and let's use a sheet header component that contains our sheet title, which will be add new collection, and also a sheet description. Collections are a way to group your tasks. And for now, let's go back to the Create Collection button and let's change the default open state to be true. Let's go back to our Create Collection sheet. And now, by default, this is opened so we can work faster. Now let's go back to our demo application and let's see what we have here. We have a name field and also a color field. So the first thing that we are going to do is to install ReactJs form. So let's open our terminal and let's type npm install ReactJs form. And now what we are going to do is to install Zod, which is a library that we will use for form validation and also API validation. npm install Zod. Now let's go back to our application. And before creating our form, we are going to create some Zod schemas that we will later use on the form and also on the API. So let's go back in our Project Explorer. And let's create on the root folder a folder called schema. And within it, let's create a file called createcollection.ts. Then let's import z from Zod. And what we are going to do is to export const create collection schema, which is a Zod object that contains name, which is of type Zod string with a min length of 4. And let's give it a custom error message. So message collection name must be at least 4 characters. And also we have a color, which is a Zod string for now. Now, before proceeding, let's go back to our demo application. As you can see in the colors section, I have a fixed set of colors. So the first thing that we are going to do is to create those colors and also force the color input to be one of those colors. And by doing this, we are preventing users from putting random strings in the color that can ruin our application behavior. So inside the lib folder, let's create a file called constants.ts. And what I'm going to do is export an enum called collection colors that contains all my colors. So sunset, poppy, rosebud, snowflake, candy, fear tree, metal, and powder. Then another thing that I'm going to export is the type collection color, which consists of key of, type of, collection colors. And this type, as you can see by putting the mouse over it, is a string union of all my colors. In this way, I can persist on the database that a collection has a color of type, let's say, sunset. And if I want to change the color later on my application, I can change it without the need to apply a query on my database to update all the colors. So now let's go back on the createcollection.ts file inside the schema folder. And now I will force the color to be one of the colors that I've defined in my constants. So let's check it. Refine color, and let's check if object.keys collection colors includes the color that I'm passing. So as you can see, the collection color is this. All my keys are poppy, are sunset, poppy, rosebud, etc. And if the color is included, everything is fine. Otherwise, I will have an error from Zod. And now the last thing that I'm going to export from this file is the export type create collection schema type. And I can get the type of this schema by using Zod infer type of create collection schema. And as you can see, if you hover the type, we have a type create collection schema type, which consists of a name property of type string and a color of type string. So let's go back to our create collection sheet and let's start implementing the form. So const form equal use form, and you can import it from ReactJs form. Let's give it a type, so create collection schema type, and you can import it from schema create collection. And then we are gonna put some options here, and let's say that the default values are empty, and also that the resolver is a Zod resolver that can be imported from import Zod resolver from hook form resolvers Zod. And the Zod resolver will take a Zod schema, which is create collection schema. And you can import it from schema create collection. Now let's move this one line bottom. And now, as you can see, we can set default values, and Typescript infers the type from the Zod schema. So we have a name and a color option. Now let's start adding our form. So after the sheet header, let's add a form component, which can be imported from components UI form. And we are going to spread our form property, returned by the use form hook, inside the form. Inside our component form, let's add a HTML form tag, so form. And what we are going to do with this is to set on submit to be form handle submit on submit. So let's create a const on submit functions that takes data, and for now just logs it. So console log submitted data. And let's give it a type of type create collection schema type. So as you can see, data contains a name and a color. Then let's start adding our form fields. So inside our form, let's add a form field component that can be imported from components UI form. And as you can see, we are importing those components with the relative path because we are inside the components folder. So now let's go back to our form field and let's close the tag earlier. And now let's add some properties to it. Control form.control. Let's give it a name, and the name also will be typed by Zod, so you can choose between color and name, as you can see. In our case, will be name. And then we have a render function that takes our field and renders it. And inside, let's put a form item that contains a form label. We are importing everything, as always, from components UI form. So form label, let's say name, and then form control. Inside we will put an input, and we are going to import it from components UI input. That is a placeholder, let's say personal. You can put it home, personal, whatever you want. You can also leave it blank if you want. And let's spread also the field object that the render function is giving to us. And also let's add a form description for this form item, and let's say collection name. The last thing that we are going to add is a form message, and this message will display our Zod errors. Now you can notice that if we refresh our page, we will have some iteration errors. Don't worry about those, because we can just avoid those by putting in our create collection button file useState to false. And we are having those errors because the server doesn't know if the sheet must be open or not at, let's say, at compilation time. So let's go back to our component. And now we are going to add the color field. So let's add another form field. And now let's say control form.control. The name will be color. And let's copy the render property from the previous form field, and let's paste it here. And now let's rename name with color. Let's change the form description to be select a color for your collection. Let's remove the input. And what we are going to use is a select. We can import this component from components UI select. Then inside our select, we will have a select trigger component, and you can import it from components UI select. Make sure you are not importing it from Radix UI. And inside the select trigger, we will have a select value, which can be imported from components UI select. Now let's add a placeholder to our select value with color. And also let's style it, so class name, full width and H8. Now let's go back to our final application to see what we are going to do. As you can see, all the options have the background color. When I select an option, also my color select gets a color. So let's go back to our application. Let's add all the color options. So after the select trigger, we are going to add a select content component, and let's import it from UI select component. Let's give it a class name of full width. And now what we are going to do is to map over object keys collection colors that you can import from lib constants. And I have a typo here. I miss an N, so let's rename it constants. Okay, and now for each key in the collection colors, we are mapping those. So let's get color. And for each color, we are going to return a select item that can be imported from components UI select. And the content of our select will be our color name. And now, as you can see, we have all the names. Now let's style it. So first of all, let's give it a key because we are inside a map loop. Then let's add a value, and the value will be color. And now we want to style those to match the current gradient color. So class name, we will use the cn function exported by ShadcnUI, so from libutils, and let's style it. So full width, H8, rounded MD, margin Y1, text white, on focus text white, focus font bold, focus ring 2, ring neutral 600, focus ring inset, and on dark focus ring white, and also focus px8. Let's see now. Perfect. So comma, and now what we are going to add is we are going to get the color from the collection color. So collection colors, and we are going to get the color. Now, as you can see, is working, but we need another fix. The first one is that we cannot index collection colors with a string, so we have to cast it to be a collection color exported by lib constant. And if you remember, we have seen that collection color is a string union. Now the other thing that you can notice is that only the first color is applied. This happens because Tailwind doesn't know that we have declared those gradients inside our constant.ts file. So in order to do this, let's go and open the tailwind config.js file, and inside the content property, let's add a new line, and let's add this line. By doing this, we are telling to Tailwind to also scan inside the lib folder all the JS and TS files in order to create all the CSS that we need. Now let's save this and let's start again our development server. Let's refresh the page. And now, as you can see, all the colors are set. Now, another thing that I want is that when I select a color, I will also color this select trigger. So let's go back to our create collection sheet file. And what I'm going to do is to add a class name to our select trigger. I will use the cn function again, and full width, H8 text white, and also field.value. Now we have to trigger the onChange event in order to test this. So on value change, we receive a color, and then field onChange color. In this way, we are updating our form with the color. Now let's try it, but this is not working because now with field value we are adding a a snowflake class to our button, but actually snowflake doesn't mean anything. So what we have to do instead is to replace it with collection colors, field value, which is snowflake, as collection color. Now, as you can see, everything is working fine. Now let's go at the end of our form. Let's add a separator, which can be imported from Components UI separator, and also a button imported from Components UI button with confirm text. Perfect. Now let's wrap the separator and the button with a div. Let's style the div to be flex, flex call, gap, and also margin top 4. Perfect. Now let's add some spacing between form fields. So let's go back in our form. Let's add a class name, space y4, flex, flex call. Perfect. Now let's go back to our button, and let's say that on click, we are going to do form handle submit on submit. Now, if you click, as you can see, it's saying that name is required and color is required. Let's try to put a name like 123. And as you can see, Zod says that collection name must be at least 4 characters. Now, let's try to put another thing like personal. Now, let's try this. And now let's check our console. And as you can see, when I click confirm, our onSubmit function is triggered and we can see the data. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is also to style this confirm button to match the color selected for the collection. So let's go back to our button. Let's add class name, cn, and inside we have to get the collection colors of the current value of the color in the form. So what we can do is form.get values, color, and let's cast it to be a collection color. Now let's try it, and as you can see, when I change it, is not refreshing. And this happens because our form get values is not triggering a state change. And by that, we are not going to re-render our application. In order to do that, what we have to do is to add form.watch color. And now, every time that the color changes, we are triggering a re-render. So let's try it now. Perfect. And also let's add to the button a variant outline. And now what I want to do is to rest the form status when I close the sheet. So let's go back at the top of our component. And let's add a const open change wrapper that takes open of type boolean and calls form.reset and also on open change with the open property. Then let's replace on open change property with open change wrapper. Let's try it now. Perfect. Now we are going to create our collection in our database. And to do that, we are going to use ServerActions. And as you can see, with ServerActions, we don't need to create API endpoints. And in order to enable the ServerActions, we have to go to our Project Explorer. Let's open the NextJs config file. So next.config.js. Then we are going to edit the next config object. So experimental. And inside, let's add a ServerActions true. Now you have to restart your development server. So npm run dev. And now in my root folder, I'm going to create a folder called actions. Within this folder, I will create a file called collection.ts. And inside this file, I'm going to create my first server action. Basically, a server action is a server-side function that you can call directly on server components or client components without the need to create API endpoints. So let's create our first action, export async function create collection. So we have a form which is of type create collection schema type that you can import from schema create collection. And this, as you can see, is synced with our form because the form also uses create collection schema type. Now, inside this function, what we can do is take the current user, so await current user exported by clerk NextJs. Now let's check if the user is not null. Otherwise, we are throwing a new error, user not found. And then we are going to return await Prisma, which can be imported from libprisma, .collection.create. And inside the create function, we are passing an object with a data property that contains our user ID, which will be user.id. And also what we need is a color, and we are getting this from form.color, and a name, and we can get it from the name, so form.name. As you can notice, this is the same code that you can put in a REST API or a gRPC endpoint, for example. But with ServerActions, everything is done by React and Next.js. You don't need to define your endpoints. So let's go back to our create collection sheet file. And now on the onSubmit, what we can do is to use a try catch to wrap our code, because if you remember, our create collection can throw errors. So let's go back. And now we are going to make this onSubmit async. Await create collection, and you can import it from actions collection, and we are gonna pass data. And as you can see, create collections takes a form of type name and color. Our data is of type name and color, so everything should work fine, because we are using the same create collection schema time, both on front end and back end. And if I have error of any type, what I'm going to do is to show a toast. But for now, we are showing an alert error. Now let's try it. And as you can see, we have an error. Let's log it. So let's inspect the console. And as you can see, we have this error, current user can only be used in a server environment. And this happens because our collection.ts file inside the actions folder is not marked for server usage. In order to do that, let's go back to our file, and on the top of it, let's use server. Now let's try it back. Let's go back to the network tab, and when I click confirm, as you can see, I have made a request with the name and color payload, and this is the response that I got from Prisma. And as you can see, the response that I got is a collection row. And now if I go back to Prisma Studio, you can see that if I click collection table, I can see that there is one record. Perfect. Now let's go back to our application. And what I want to do is to add some toast on success or error, and also close this new collection and reload the collection list. I'm going to implement the toast exported by ShadcnUI. So let's go back in our app folder in the main layout file, and after the children, let's add a toaster that you can import from components UI toaster, and in this way we are adding an anchor point for the toasts. So let's go back, let's close this, and now as you can see in my page.tsx file, I can see anything because now I have records. So let's go back to dashboard, page.tsx, and what we have to do is to add another return statement. So for now we are going to return a div that contains collections.length, and also let's add the create collection button. Now it says that I have one collection, so let's go back to our create collection button.tsx, and let's change the useState true to be false. Then we are going to create collection sheet.tsx file. Then we are going to remove this alert, and let's add a toast, which can be imported from UI use toast. And toast will use an object that contains title. Let's put error, description, and let's say something went wrong. Please try again later. And the variant will be destructive. Let's do the same, but for the success part. So title success. Description will be collection created successfully. And let's remove the variant destructive. Then I want to close the sheet. So close the sheet. Open change wrapper, false. In this way, I'm setting open to false, and I'm also resetting the form. And then another thing that I'm going to do is to go to my button and make it disabled while the form state is submitting. By doing this, I will prevent the user clicking more than one time while submitting. Let's add also a spinner for our button while submitting. So after the confirm text, let's add form state is submitting. If it's true, I'm going to add a reload icon that you can import from ReactJs React icons. And let's style it. So margin left 2, H4, with 4, animate spin. Let's try it now. So let's create a new collection. And as you can see, I have a toast. In order to see our animation and our disabled state, let's go back to our collection.ts file inside the actions folder. And now in order to slow down the function call, what we can do is await wait, which can be imported from libwait, for example, 5 seconds. Let's try it. So now home, rosebud, and as you can see, everything is working fine. Now let's remove our wait function. Let's go back to create collection sheet, and there is a problem, as you can see. Our collections are not updating. But if I refresh the page, I can see that there are 2 collections. What I have to do is to tell NextJs to reload this part of the code. Not everything, just this. So in order to do this, let's go at the top of the create collection sheet file, and I'm going to import use router from next navigation. Now let's go back to our code, and let's add const router equal use router. And then after closing the sheet, what we can do is just router.refresh. Let's try it now. So I'm creating a test collection, and as you can see, our collection has been updated. So let's check our final result, and the next thing that we are going to do is to show our collections. So let's go back to our application. Let's go to our dashboard page.tsx file, and inside the collection list component, let's replace this line, so let's remove this, and let's add a collections map, and for each collection, we are going to render a collection card. Let's give it key equal to collection.id, and let's also give the collection to the card. Now we are going to implement these components, so let's go back to our Explorer. Inside the components folder, let's create a collection card.tsx component. I'm using RFC to create it. Let's go back to our dashboard page and let's import it. So let's import collection card from components collection card. Now let's go back to our collection card.tsx file, and we are going to define the properties. So interface props collection of type collection, and you can import the type collection from Prisma client. And as you can see, we have everything typed by Prisma. So let's extract collection from the properties, and this is of type props. And now what I can do is replace this, for example, with collection.name. Now let's go back to our demo application. And as you can see, a collection card is a collapsible object. So let's go and create this layout for our collection. So let's get rid of this div and let's add a collapsible. And you can import it from components UI collapsible. Make sure to not import it from Radix UI. Then we will have an open state is open, and also on open change set is open. So we are going to declare the is open state, const is open, set is open, equal use state, default true. And as you can see, we have an error because we cannot use state inside the React server component. So let's make this collection card a client component by using the use client directive on the top of the file. Perfect. Now let's add a collapsible trigger, and you can import it from components UI collapsible. And inside this trigger, we are going to use a button that you can import from components UI button. the content of the button for now will be the collection.name. Now let's style the button, so variant ghost, and also class name. We will use cm function, so import it from libutils. Then we will have flex, full width, justify between, and also some padding. Then we will color the button with the collection color, so collection colors, and let's import it from lib constants. We will use collection.color as collection color, and you can import it from lib constants. Now let's go back to our page.tsx, and we are going to transform this div to a fragment, and then we are going to wrap our CollectionCard component with a div. Let's style the div to be flex col gap 4, and also margin top 6. Perfect. Let's go back to our CollectionCard. Let's wrap our collection name with a span. Let's style it, text white, font bold. We are going to add a caret up and down icon, so if it's not open, we are going to show a caret down icon that you can import from RedXUI React icons. And if is open, so let's remove this, caret up icon. And remember to import it from RedXUI React icons. Now let's style those icons, H6, W6. Let's do the same for this icon. And now what we are going to do in order to avoid redirection errors is to put the asChild property to the collapsible trigger. So let's try it. Perfect. Now let's go back to our demo application, and as you can see, we have a content that contains all the tasks of the collection, and also a footer that contains some actions, a delete button that deletes the collection, and also a add new task button that adds a task to the collection. So let's go and create this footer. Let's go back to our application, and after the collapsible trigger, we are going to add collapsible content. And you can import it from components UI collapsible. And let's create a mocked tasks array. So what we can do now is go back to our collapsible content and say, if tasks.length equals 0, then we will have, for example, a div, no tasks. Otherwise, what we will have, tasks.length greater than 0, then we will have a fragment that contains our progress, and you can import it from UI progress, and also a div that contains tasks.map, and for each task we are going to return a simple div mocked task for now. This will be an array of string. Remember, this is just a mock. Then we are going to style our collapsible content, so flex rounded bottom MD, flex col dark background neutral 900, and also shadow LG. Then let's add some tasks here, so task 1, task 2. And as you can see, we have the progress bar, but we also have to change the bottom border of our button. So let's go back to our button, and in the class name, let's add is open rounded B none. Perfect. Let's go back now to our progress. Let's style it, rounded none, and let's put a fixed value for now, for example, 45. Then let's style the div that contains our tasks. Remember, for now the tasks are mocked. Later on, we will add those on the database. Let's style this with some padding, gap3, flex call. Then we are going to add our footer. So let's add a separator that you can import from components UI separator. Then let's add a footer with the footer text inside. Let's style it. Age 40 pixel, px4, padding 2 pixels, text xs, text neutral 500, flex, justify between, items center. Now let's replace the footer with a p tag, and inside created at collection.createdAt.toDateString. Now, before moving on, I want to focus on an error that you can get with dates. The problem with this component is that the date is first rendered on the server and then is also rendered on the client after the redirection process. So if I use, for example, the toDateString method, I don't have problems. But if I use toLocaleDateString, then I will have redirection problems, as you can see, because the server, as you can see, is transforming my date to this string, while the client is transforming the date to this string. And I have a mismatch error between client and server. So make sure to use the same format. Another way to fix this is to set a locale to toLocaleDateString. So, for example, and use. And now, as you can see, I don't have redirection errors. Now let's go back to our demo application and let's see what happens when I click the delete button. As you can see, a confirmation dialog pops out. So let's go back to our code. So now let's create our plus and delete button. So let's create a div and inside we are going to add a button. I need a plus icon for this. So let's go back to our Project Explorer, components, icons, and let's create a plus icon.tsx file. I'm using RFC inside. Then I'm going to hero icons and I will search plus. So let's copy this and let's replace the div with the content that we have copied. Perfect. Let's go back to our application. Let's go back to the collection card and let's add a plus icon inside. And we are going to import it from icons plus icon. Now let's put size icon to the button, variant ghost, and let's go to the plus icon and let's change width 6 with 4 and also 86 to 84. Perfect. Now let's copy this button, let's paste it, and let's change the plus icon with trash icon that you can import from RedXUI React icons. Then we are going to create our confirmation alerts. So let's add the alert dialog that you can import from UI alert dialog. Then we are going to use an alert dialog trigger. And what we are going to do is to put our button with the trash icon inside the alert dialog trigger. Then let's add the asChild property to the alert dialog trigger. And now let's add another component, which is alert dialog content. And as always, you can import it from components UI alert dialog. Make sure to not import it from RedXUI. And for now, let's write hello. And as you can see, I can see my dialog. Then we are going to add an alert dialog footer. And inside the footer, we are going to add alert dialog cancel. And you can import it as always for components UI alert dialog. And let's write cancel inside. And as you can see, I'm getting an error because I need to wrap everything inside the alert dialog content. So I will move this after the footer. Perfect. Then after the alert dialog cancel, I'm also adding alert dialog action. And let's write proceed. Let's try it now. And I have an error because I accidentally imported alert dialog action and trigger from RedXUI. So let's delete those. Let's import those from components UI alert dialog and also these from components UI alert dialog. Let's check it now. Perfect. And as you can see, if I click cancel, the alert disappears. Now let's replace the hello string with the alert dialog title, which can be imported from UI alert dialog. Let's see the result. So let's write, are you absolutely sure? And then also an alert dialog description. Let's import it from components UI alert dialog. And let's write this action cannot be undone. This will permanently delete your collection and all tasks inside it. Now let's check it. Looks good. And now we are going to create a server action called delete collection. So let's go back to our actions collection.ts folder and we are going to export a sync function delete collection that takes an ID of type number. And what we are going to do is to get the user, so const user equal await current user. If the user is null, we are going to throw new error user not found. And now we are just going to return await prisma.collection.delete where ID equals ID. Let's go back to our collection card component. And now what we are going to do is to create a function const remove collection, which is async. And inside this function, we are going to call await delete collection that you can import from actions collection. And we are going to use collection.id. Now let's wrap it inside a try catch block. Then let's use a toast that you can import from components UI use toast. And we are going to set the title to be success and the description to be collection deleted successfully. Let's do the same for the error. So let's copy the toast and inside the catch, let's change the title to be error. And then cannot delete collection and the variant will be destructive. Then what I'm going to do is const router equal use router, and you have to import it from next/navigation. And on delete, what we are going to do is router.refresh. Now let's try this. So what we are going to do is to call the delete collection function on the proceed button. On click, remove collection. Then let's try it. So proceed. And as you can see, I got a success toast and my collection has been deleted. Now I'm going to use the new React use transition hook in order to show a loading state while the collection is deleted. So let's go on our collection card. Let's type const is loading start transition equal use transition, and you can import it from React. Now we can wrap our remove collection call inside the start transition, and is loading will be set to true while the transition is happening. So let's go back to our proceed button. So what we can do is just start transition of remove collection. Then I'm gonna change my UI while loading. So let's go back here, and if it's loading, I will show a deleting text. Otherwise, if it's not loading, I will show my buttons. So let's take this and let's move it. Let's try it now. And before proceeding, I will go back to our actions collection.ts and I will slow down my delete collection function. So await, wait 5 seconds. Now let's try to delete this. And as you can see, we have a deleting text. Perfect. So let's remove our wait function. Now we are going to add the tasks to our collections. So let's go back to our project explorer and let's open the schema.prisma file. Let's add a new model called task. We have an ID of type int. Let's mark it as ID and also default auto increment. Then we have a content of type string, user ID of type string, done, which is a boolean and default value is false, expires at, which is an optional date time, created at, which is a date time and the default value is now, and also a parent collection. So we have a collection ID int and then collection of type collection, which is a relation on field collection ID that references ID, and on delete cascade. And in order to get rid of this error, we have to add tasks of type task array on the collection. Perfect. Now let's open back our terminal and let's type npx prisma migrate dev. The name for the migration will be added task model. Now let's run back our development server. And now let's move on the dashboard page. So inside the dashboard folder, let's open the page.tsx file. And what we are going to do in order to retrieve the tasks for each collection, we are going to add include tasks true. Now let's go back to our collection card component And as you can notice, the collection that we have defined in the properties does not contain tasks. So now we are going to extend this type to include also tasks of type task, and you can import it from Prisma client, and it is an array. So now our collection contains also the tasks. Now we can remove this fake tasks array, and now as you can see we have to define those tasks. You have two options. You can replace tasks with collection.tasks, or if you don't want to change your code, you can define tasks equal to collection.tasks. And our code is still working. Now let's add a key there, so task.id, and we are going also to replace it with task.content. So I'm going to refresh the page, and I don't have tasks. Perfect. Now let's create the modal form for creating tasks. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to create a const show create modal, set show create modal equal use state, and default value is false. Let's search the plus icon, and on click set show create modal true. Now let's wrap everything inside a fragment, and let's add a create task dialog component, and we will have a open property show create modal, set open that takes set show create modal, and also the collection. Now let's go back in our Project Explorer, and in the components folder let's create a create task dialog.tsx file. So I'm using RFC as always to import it, and let's import this. Now let's go back to our create task dialog. Let's define an interface props that takes open, which is a boolean, collection of type collection, and you can import it from Prisma client, and also set open, which is a function that takes a boolean and returns nothing. Then let's go and mark this component to be a client component. And now let's replace the div with a dialog, and you can import it from components UI dialog. Inside dialog content, same import path, dialog header, then dialog title, add task to collection. Then we are going to set open equals open. Let's extract everything from the props. So open collection set open of type props. And also on open change wrapper. Let's define it. Const open change wrapper is a function that calls set open value. Let's say value boolean. Let's try it. Perfect. Then we are going to add a span that contains the collection.name. And now we are going to style this span. So class name, we are going to use cn function that you can import from libutils. And now let's add some padding, 1 pixel, background clip text, and text transparent. And I'm doing this because I want to color the collection name with the gradient of the collection. So let's do that. And also let's apply collection colors of type collection.color as collection color. And we can import this from libconstants. And as you can see, my title has the same color of my collection. Let's try another color, for example, home, with a candy. Everything looks good. Now let me zoom in. Let's remove this. Let's style also the content. And let's give it SM max width 425 pixels. Then we are going to style the title, flex gap 2. Perfect. Now, after the dialog title, we are going to add the dialog description, and you can import it from components UI dialog. And we are going to add a task to your collection. You can add as many tasks as you want to a collection. Now we have to create our form, but before doing that, we have to create a new schema. So let's go back to our Project Explorer, and inside the schema folder, let's create a file called create task.ts. We are going to import z from zod, export const create task schema equal z object that contains an object with collection ID, which is a zod number not negative, the content, which is a zod string with a min length of 8. We are going to give a custom error message for the validation, so task content must be at least 8 characters. And also expires at, which is zod date, optional. And then we are going to export type create task schema type equal zod.infer type of create task schema. And as you can see, create task schema type is an object with content, collection ID, and expires set, date, or undefined. Now let's go back to our create task dialog, and we are going to define const form equal use form that you can import from React hook form that works on create task schema type. Then we have a resolver property, zod resolver, with create task schema, and then default values, and we will give to our collection ID the collection.id. Then let's go back to our dialog content, and after the header, let's add a div. Let's add a form that you have to import from components UI form. Let's spread the form on this component. Then let's put an HTML form inside it. Let's style it, space y4 flex call, and on submit form.handle submit on submit. We are going to create the on submit function. Const on submit takes data of type create task schema type, console log submitted data. Let's make it async. Now let's go back to our form, and inside the form let's add form field, control form.control, name content, and the render method gives us a field, and we are returning a form item that contains a form label. And remember, I'm importing form field, form item, and all the related form components from components UI form directory. So form label, let's write content. Sorry, I have a typo. Then form control, and inside we have a text area imported from components UI text area. And after the form control, we have a form message. Now we are going to edit our text area. So let's close this, and then rows 5, placeholder task content here. And also we are going to spread the field. And we are spreading the field variable because it contains things like value, on change, etc. Then let's copy this, let's paste it, and let's rename the name with expires at. The form label became expires at. And let's remove text area. Instead, we are going to use a date picker. And before adding the date picker, let's add after form label a form description that contains when should this task expire. Now let's go back to our form control, and we are going to use a popover, and you can import it from components UI popover that contains a popover trigger, and again import it from components UI popover, and also a popover content. And again, don't import it from Redux UI, but from components UI popover. Inside the popover content, we are going to use a calendar, and you can import it from components UI calendar. And let's set mode to single, selected field.value, on select field.onChange, and also initial focus. Let's close the tag. Now let's go back to our popover trigger, and let's add as child property. And also inside the popover trigger component, we are going to add button, and you can import it from components UI button. And inside the button, we will have a calendar icon that you can import from Radix UI React icons. And let's style it H4 with 4. Now let's style our button, variant outline, And also class name, we are going to use the cn function, justify start, text left, font normal, window full. And also we are going to add a custom style if there is no value. So if not field.value, then we are going to add text muted foreground. Then let's go after the calendar icon and let's add if field.value, then we are going to format the date using the format function exported by datefns. So format of field.value and let's say PPP. And otherwise, if there is no value, we are going to show a span that contains no expiration. Let's try it. So I'm clicking it. And as you can see, everything works. Now let's go back to our code. And now let's go before the dialog content closing tag and let's add a dialog footer that you can import from components UI dialog. And let's add a button inside with a confirmed text. Let's style the button. So class name, and we are going to use cn, full width, dark text white, and text white. And we are going to color it as the collection. So collection colors of collection.color as collection color. Perfect. Now let's go back to our wrapping div and let's style it. And let's add a gap and also py4. Perfect. Now let's go and edit the button in the same way that we have done previously for the collection create buttons. So we are going to disable the button while the form state is submitting. Then on click, we are going to handle the submit. So form handle submit on submit. And then after the confirmed text, if the form state is submitting, we are going to show our loading spinner. So we are going to use reload icon exported by Redux UI React icons. And we will animate it. So animate spin, H4, width 4, and margin left 2. Now let's show the results. So I'm inverting my condition. And as you can see, everything looks good. So let's remove this. Now we are going to create our server actions. So let's go back to the Project Explorer. And inside the actions folder, let's create a task.ts file. Let's mark this file with use server. And then we are going to export async function create task that takes data of type create task schema type, and you can import it from schema create task. And inside we are going to take the user, so const user equal await current user that you can import from clerk NextJs. If the user is null, we are going to throw new error user not found. And then we are going to return await Prisma that you can import from lib Prisma dot task dot create data. And now we have user ID and we can take it from user.id. Content data.content expires at, you can just do data.expireset. But if you want a shorter way to do this, you can just extract everything from data like content expires at and collection ID. Remove this and just use content expires set. And then we are going to connect this task with the parent collection. So collection, connect, ID, collection ID. Perfect. Let's go back to our create task dialog and let's go on our onSubmit function. What we are going to do is await create task, and we can import this function from actions task, and we are going to pass data. Now let's wrap everything inside a try catch. On error we will show a toast, so let's import it from components UI use toast. Title error, description cannot create task, and variant destructive. Then let's go back on the try. If everything is okay, we are going to show a toast with the title success, description, task created successfully. Then we are going to call open change wrapper to false and also router.refresh. Now let's go here and let's reset the form. And then let's define const router equal use router and make sure to import it from next navigation. Let's try it. So first task test, and let's give it an expiration, for example. Let's confirm. Perfect. Let's add another one. Second task example. Perfect. Now let's go back to our collection card component. And then we are going to improve the no tasks text. So let's go there. And then let's replace the div with a button that contains a p tag. There are no tasks yet, followed by a span that contains create one text. Then we are going to style the button, so variant ghost, class name flex items center, justify center, gap 1, padding 8, padding y 12, rounded none. Then on button click, what we are going to do is to set show create modal to true. Let's try it. Perfect. And then we are going to style the span, so class name. Let's replace this with the cn function. Text sm, background clip text, text transparent, collection colors, collection.color as collection color. By doing this, the create one text has the same color of the collection. So let's try with another color. Sorry, home is already existing. Perfect. Now let's improve our task component. So let's go back on our tasks map and let's replace this div with a task card component that has the same key and also takes the task. Now we are going to create it. So let's go to the Project Explorer and inside components, let's create the file taskcard.tsx. Let's start it with RFC. Let's mark it as a client component. Let's go back to our collection card and let's import it. Let's go back to our task card component. Let's start by defining the properties. So task of type task, and we can import this task type from Prisma client. Now let's remove this text, and what we are going to do is to use a checkbox that you can import from components UI checkbox, and also a HTML label that contains task.content, and if the task has an expiration date, it also contains a p tag that contains format that you can import from datefns of task.expireSet with this format. Perfect. Let's style the expiration date. I'm going to use cn, text xs, text neutral 500, and on dark text neutral 400. And I want also to add a get expiration color for task.expireSet. Then we are going to create this function outside our component. Function get expiration color and takes a expire at date. And what we are going to do is to take the elapsed days. So const days equal math.floor of expires at get time minus date now. So we are dividing this by 1060 and then 60 again. Now if days less than 3 times 24, which stands for 3 days, and 24 stays for hours, we are going to return text red 500 for light theme, and for dark theme text red 400. Let's copy this. Now let's replace 3 with 7 days. We are going to change red to orange and also red to orange. Otherwise, we are returning text green 500 and on dark text green 400. The last check is if days is less than 0, we are returning text gray 500 and on dark text gray 300. So let's try it. Perfect. Now let's go back to our checkbox. Let's style the div that wraps the checkbox. And we are setting flex, a gap, and also items start. Then we are going to style the checkbox. 5, H5. We are going to say checked to be task.done. Then we are going to edit our label. So HTML for task.id.toString. So let's give to the checkbox the ID equal task.id.toString. And then we are going to style the label. So class name, we are going to use the cn function. And then we are going to add text SM, font medium, leading none, peer disabled cursor not allowed, peer disabled opacity 70, decoration 1, and also dark decoration white. Then if task done is true, we are going also to add line through. Now let's test it by inverting this. Perfect. Finally, on checkbox click, we are going to set the tasks to done. So we are going to create our action. So let's go back on our actions folder inside the task.ts file. And we are going to export async function set task to done, ID number, and we can copy this from the create task function. And then what we are going to do is return await prisma.task.update where ID and also user ID user.id, and what we are updating is data, and we are setting done to true. So let's go back to our task card component and let's add to the checkbox on checked change property. And inside this function, we are going to mark this task as done. Let's go back and use const is loading start transition from the use transition hook. And what we are going to do is just start transition. And inside we will have an async callback that calls await set task done, which can be imported from actions. And let's pass the task.id. And after this, we are going to refresh our router. So router.refresh. Let's go and define the router. So const router equal use router. And you have to import it from next navigation. Let's try it. And as you can see, I've clicked it, but now I can click again. So what I can do is disabled, and I want to disable this if the task is already done or if is loading. So let's try it now. Looks good. Now the very last thing that we are going to do is to fix our progress bar. So let's go back to the collection card. And if you remember, we have a progress. And now we can replace this hard-coded value with a variable called progress. Then we are going to define it. So before our return statement, const progress equal if collection.tasks.length is equal to 0, we are going to return 0. Otherwise, tasks done divided by total tasks. And we are going to multiply this by 100. Then we are going to define total tasks. So const total tasks equal, and we can copy this, paste, remove this, and call this total tasks. And also we have to define tasks done. So const tasks done. And in order to avoid performance issues, we are going to use memo from React that has the collection.tasks as a dependency. We are going to return collection.tasks.filter, and we are going to take the tasks that are done, and we are going to count it. So dot length. Let's refresh everything. Now let's try it. So I'm creating one task. I'm creating another one. And a third one. Now let's try to mark the last one as done. And as you can see, only 1/3 of the progress bar is active. Perfect. Now we are going to double check the color of the expiration date. So let's create another task. And let's give a close expiration date. As you can see, the color is red. Let's create another one with a higher expiration date. And as you can see, is green. Let's create a middle one. So, for example, at the end of August. And as you can see, it's still red. I think there is an error. Probably I haven't changed it. Perfect. Now let's double check also the like theme. So everything looks good. Perfect. Okay, everything is working fine. If you made it to the end, I thank you and I remind you to give a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.